Hi, I'm Holly, and for the teens today, I'm going to teach you how to draw your own version of the Corpse Bride. All right, what we will need for this project, you're going to need just any kind of paper. It doesn't have to be white paper. It could be in a sketchbook. It could be heavy or thin. You want a pencil, probably with a good eraser on it. And you could use actually different type of media. So I am going to use some markers. And even though I might not have purple in this piece, just for some deeper tones, like if you don't have a black, or if you have a black that's running out, you might want to use a color like a purple. Or you could even try doing some complementary colors like I taught you last time. And then I'll have some turquoise. I'm going to have actually a green this time. And some pinks. Doesn't have to look exactly like this. I'm going to do mine slightly different than this one because I think sometimes it's more fun to do different versions of a picture. And then you get to see how it looks. And then you could always put some colored pencils in for shading or crayons if you don't have that. Like I'm going to have this blue, maybe a little bit of a green. We'll see. I'm not even sure exactly how I'll do the colors at this point, but I would just get colors that you feel you're comfortable with, or you could even just do it in black and white. It doesn't have to be colored. But since I've taught you guys a lot about drawing more realistic, although last week was a bit more surreal, I thought it'd be fun to do something more illustrative this time because, of course, talking about eyes, I mean, this is not realistic at all, but it doesn't matter. That's the cool thing about eyes is that as long as you get what you're going for, everyone else understands. So what you want to start with, you want to make sure your paper is facing up, so it's showing more of the vertical rather than, I mean, you could do it this direction. I just find I like to give myself more room. And I'm going to make sure I start near the top. I'm going to give myself some space up here because I don't want it to be super crowded, and also down at the bottom. So I'm going to start just with this oval shape. And notice that the top of the head is going to be more round. The bottom part's a bit more pointy. And then I think I'll also notice how incredibly long and thin the neck is, because I think it's supposed to more represent a spinal column since this is the Corpse Bride and she's dead. So, and then don't worry too much about the hair. The hair is really fun with this because you can go all crazy and you can do it a bunch of different ways and it still works. If you're not comfortable just drawing in the eyes, you could either use a ruler or maybe you use a folder or another paper or a book or something to kind of line up. You could even take it, kind of draw a line. Sometimes people are more comfortable with that, getting the setup, and that can help you keep everything straight. Now this time, notice how huge the eyes are. And again, you could use something round, like, you know, I could trace, well, that would be, you know, this part's obviously way too big, but see the cardboard would be a good size. Or you could just freehand it, doesn't matter. They don't have to be exactly the same size. Notice in this case, we definitely don't have this space in the center equal to one eye. This time we don't need that. Because again, once you know the rules, you can break them. That's one of the great things about being an artist. All right, so her pupils, she doesn't have any irises in her eyes. Notice that? A lot of more cartoony pictures are like that. The iris is missing. That's because you can get a lot just from the pupils, basically. So, and also the highlights usually aren't there either. So I'm just going to draw the pupils. In my case, she's going to be looking off to the side, but you could do that however you want. And before I put in any more detail, I'm just going to kind of give myself a placement for her nose and her mouth. Now to make it a little bit easier on yourself, again, you could just start with a line. Notice how these two look so different right now, but you see the similarities. That's all you need. So don't worry again about, I mean, this is a process, so give yourself time to work on this, and no matter how it looks, it's awesome that you guys are trying this. Now I'm just gonna turn the smile up a little bit, and she's got these like really huge lips, and they kind of start right over in the corners here, and it gets a little bit bigger in the center. You can see how, in fact, it looks like right now that the mouth is just open. And you could take this and you could make a totally different character too. You don't have to even do this character. If something's calling your imagination, then that's okay. You can change it however you would like. So for the upper lip, I just have this Cupid's bow right in here. It just looks like a little smiley face. Do you see that? Because if I don't have that, this is how it looks. See how that doesn't look quite as realistic? But if it's easier to start that way, then just add a peak. Add 2 peaks actually right there underneath the nose. And go ahead and erase that. And then you got your shape. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now for the nose, what you want to do is it almost looks like, to me it makes me think of watermelon seeds. So you just draw in those shapes right in there. It's pretty small and they're pretty close together, and they're above that Cupid's bow approximately. You don't have to worry about any shading at this point. I sometimes like to fill in everything and then shade and add the details, so that if I decide, oh, wait a minute, maybe I decide this is a little bit off right here. Oh, I want to bring down this area. I don't have to erase as much. I don't have to change as much. It just feels far more efficient that way. So before I add in any other parts to her face, I want to add in the eyebrows, because to me, when just looking at her face, that's like the next thing that feels, before I do maybe all the eyelashes and everything, that feels like the next thing for me. So, and notice how much expression the eyebrows give to the face. If I do her eyebrows like this, it's just kind of like a pleasant expression. Maybe even looks slightly surprised because they're raised up a little bit. If I do her eyebrows like this, very, very different expression, right? So this one almost looks more, well, what would you think about that expression? To me, it feels more uncertain. It feels more like she's nervous. Maybe she's trying to please somebody. So it's kind of the opposite. If you're angry or maybe determined looking, then the eyebrows are going to go down. In this case, the eyebrow is going to go up and come down at the bottom. See what a totally different look that gives to the eye? So I'm just going to repeat the same thing. It's just a mirrored look over here. So I start about the same level, and I'm going to, there's a lot of space. Notice there's not a lot of space between her eyes, but there's a lot more space between her eyebrows. It's kind of interesting. So I'm going to bring that over here. Okay, so then again, I'm getting the basic shape in there. Now, before I go on, I might just want to look at everything and ask myself, how can I possibly change anything? What I'm going to do is just darken up my lines a bit here, and I might make this side a bit more wide for her cheekbones. Notice I'm still not even worried about her hair, and I'm not focused yet on eyelashes or shading. Okay, what I want to do next, my next big shape to cover are her cheekbones. Now, because she's pretty much, she's a corpse, right? So her face is very sunken in. She doesn't really have any meat on her bones, right? So I'm going to make this shape right in here. It's just a curve, and then it comes down towards the mouth. Okay, now I feel like I have the basics, and I can start adding some detail. And by the way, you don't have to wait to add the hair. I just sometimes find it a little easier, since the face is the main thing I'm looking at, to start there. So for her eyebrows, for her eyelashes, For her eyelashes, it's going to be the same as the realistic eyes as far as the direction. Isn't that interesting that even with a cartoon type of image or very illustrative character, you still have the eyebrows basically, or sorry, I keep saying that, the eyelashes going away from where the tear ducts would be. In this case, we're not even drawing the tear ducts, but you know they would be right here by her nose. And again, the eyelashes are just coming out towards the ends there, going away from the nose. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to start adding in the hair. Notice that you can see the part in her hair right here, and you can see some hair at the top. Most of the hair you see is going to be down below. I can actually either add some hair here, and look at your own picture and ask yourself, do I need more up here or do I need more down here? You decide where it fits best. A few of you had seen me drawing this picture and had been asking, oh, can I have that? Well, even better, now you get to have one that you created so you know how it's done. I think that's way more fun to be able to learn how to do it yourself, because then you're empowered. You can do it whenever you want. Okay, now with her hair, this is the fun part, because you could just do this however you might feel. The idea with the hair to me is that it's kind of crazy, right? It's a little bit jagged, it's unpredictable. But one thing that helps is, okay, we're pretty symmetrical on her face. You can be much more asymmetrical, meaning not symmetrical, on her hair. I'm going to not really cover up her neck, although that wouldn't really matter if it was. But see how this can just fill up the space? And notice how I'm not trying to quickly shade in. I'm making more of a shape right in here. It almost reminds me of like broken glass a little bit, or like dried branches on a tree. There's a lot of different ways you can think about it. But kind of like with the eyes, how you can draw eyes so many different ways and you still get the idea. Same with the hair. The hair does not have to be totally realistic. You know that this is hair just by the position on the head. So you can get really fun and creative with this. I'm going to put, for these little roses, so maybe for this small one, I might just do like a circle and maybe another circle and another circle, something like that. Or you could even put a few little petals on the side. And again, the asymmetry, maybe over here, I do a bigger one. Here's a little fun way to do it. You can draw a tiny little heart and then you start drawing, you know, you do fish scales, kind of like this. We've all done that. It's the same idea, except the fish scales, instead of going in rows, it's more of like it goes in circles. So that's a way you could put, if you want to, you could do like kind of like a row shape. This is like super fast. You could probably do a lot better than that, in fact. But that's just your basic idea. Okay, so I have this whole thing started. But the fun part is the shading with this one. So what I'm going to do first, I think I want to start more with the eyes. And if you have a black, that's great. But if not, maybe I just want to see what it would look like if I did it in purple. I am going to just trace my circle. Notice that the circles don't have to be perfect with the eyes. They do not have to be perfect circles. That helps us out, right? And if you want them to be, that's fine too. You just have options. Notice that the eyelashes towards the ends of the eyes can get a lot longer. And then as they come in closer to the nose, they get shorter. Something like that. I might even come in here and first do this in the purple again, just to see the different look. With the eyebrows, when you're shading it, the way I did these is I made them thicker at the top, and then they just taper out, meaning they just get thin. If I just draw a line first, I just have to come back to this top line and make that shape that's thicker in the center, and then again it just fades out and I don't even have to touch the ends of the eyebrows at all. I'm just doing this mostly in purple, again, just to see what it looks like. Sometimes it's nice to have a base color. She's more blue. Maybe this one I want to do more of a purple version. Again, just to make them different. Even though she's not really purple, I think, in the movie, but that's all right. She might even be in parts of the movie because of the different lighting. Now for the nose, I want to keep this more light. See how I'm just kind of barely using the edge of the marker? And also for up here, now I can go a little darker up here, and I'm just making lines. Do you see how the lines itself kind of act like shading, but it's just not as dark? Now I can go dark up here, and maybe I just outline her whole face. Sometimes it's nice to outline things, especially big shapes like the hairline and the cheekbones, because sometimes when you start over here, sometimes you lose these pencil lines and then you forget where your original drawing was. And that can end up with a different look at the end. Sometimes that's even a good thing, right? But I want to make sure I keep that there. Great thing about art is that your picture can turn out so many different ways, and it's still your picture, right? At the end of the day, like, you're not going to hurt anything if you mess it up a little bit. Your picture will just look a little different, right? For the hair, I'm gonna first just make some lines up here at the top, and then I'm gonna skip some space. That makes it look shiny if I leave some light up there. And I'm just going to take my purple, and I do not have to follow the pencil lines right here. The pencil lines are fine too if they remain pencil lines. One thing with your art is, again, when you think about mixed media, it's okay to do something like trace over your lines and then also have other lines that you don't trace over at all. And you can erase them, or you could just leave them. In my case, I'm just going to leave some other lines there because to me it just looks, I'm going to add more color anyway, and I just think it adds a little bit more texture, a little bit more interest. And it's easier for me in this case to almost be a little bit spontaneous with my lines and not worry too much about them, because it doesn't matter if I go here or here, not really, not over here in this space, because it all is just going to get filled in. And so you can give it, it's not like scribbling, right? Because you're still in control of it, but it's just far more loose and spontaneous. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing. Now, do you see how I have all these lines? Now, where the way you shade it can be important, because in this case, since her neck is like this column and it isn't flat, right? It does have some roundness to it. So I'm going to have my lines be slightly curved as I shade down. And notice how that slight curve does make this feel a little bit more round. In fact, right here is kind of flat, and you can see how this looks more curved just by the shape of the shading. That's it. If this is new to you, or if this is even too challenging, you don't even have to worry about these lines. The biggest problem people are probably going to make is just make them like super, super thick, which is, it looks fine like in the corners, but at some parts it might just look a little too dark. So the idea is that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the marker, and I'm leaving a lot of white space in between the lines so that it feels like a lighter shade rather than something really heavy. Like if I were to make a lot of dark lines close together, clearly that looks quite different. Now notice how I didn't outline her lips right here? That's because I don't know if I want her lips to be outlined that dark. So I want to go to maybe more of this is the same one I used right here, just more of like a dark pink. I might start with the center, just because, again, that helps to establish where the drawing is going and maybe how thick I want to make my lines. And I think I'm going to actually bring this one out a little farther to the right. And I'm going to bring this one a little farther upwards. So again, you do not have to completely follow your pencil lines. If as you're drawing, you might be like, oh, you know what? This actually looks a little bit better out here. Gives yourself a little bit more freedom. And then I might shade in a little with a lighter pink. And maybe, see how this is just like a solid line? Maybe this time I go back more to tiny small lines, but I'm going to leave a bit more white in the center because then it looks like it's the bottom lip is catching the light right in there. And I'm going to fill in more of the top part. I might even do some cross hatching. That's just the two lines crossing over each other. I'm like tempted to add, maybe I'll just add a little bit of pink. I don't really want to add too much pink because it's a bit too lively for her considering that she's dead. So I might come over here and just fill in again, like it's okay if there's more color here. It's nice to have a little pop of color. That's the other thing. See how it's like 1, 2, 3? By the way, 3 is a great number for designing. Things look really good in 3s. Okay, so I have this whole thing established, but I do think I want to add some other colors. And just to make it kind of different from this one, I'm going to take this darker blue. I'm going to come over here. I'm not going to do this with everyone, like every single eyelash, just with some of them. It's kind of like the picture that I did last week. The picture that we did last week with all of the different colors in the eyelashes. Again, I just wanted to do something different. Give yourself permission to do your own thing. The more you can give yourself permission as an artist to make your work your own and that it does not have to look exactly like the picture, then I think you're going to enjoy it a lot more. Now, there are times where we're going for total accuracy, right? Like maybe there's some of you who might eventually even do some commission work, meaning someone pays you to do some specific picture. Maybe some of you have already done that. I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, doesn't that look pretty right there? And sometimes people, maybe they want you to do like a portrait, and maybe in that case they're wanting it to look as close to the photographic reference as possible. Okay, so there are definitely times where we want things to look just like our reference, but then there's other times where maybe we don't. Maybe we want it to look different, or maybe we just want to see what happens. We're just curious. Very good to be curious as an artist. So again, I was just going over, I was doing some cross hatching with those lines just to add a little bit more texture. Now notice there's some shading over the side of her forehead here. And I'm going to go over on this edge. I want to shade in those sunken cheekbones right in there. Maybe even a little on the side of the face there. And a little bit over here. Because you see how the light's really hitting this area of the face and then just fading off to the edges. I might do a little bit more. Okay, I might even do, I should do some. Now, if I do some up here, since I took this color and I moved it around, I should make sure I also do it down here. Otherwise, it'll feel like, why isn't there that color there? You want to have some harmony. And again, the strokes, they do not have to be perfect. Remember, I've done this for a really long time, so don't feel bad if you're like, oh, I'm afraid to do this. I think the more experience you have, the more confident you tend to be with your brush strokes. Sometimes it's nice even to just do pictures like this because it does give you permission to just make some bold lines. A lot of artists, especially younger artists, we have a tendency to do this kind of a thing. Right? Where we're just like, okay, Let's make this one line, but let's just go millimeter by millimeter. I'm not sure, and that's fine. But you can also do this, right? And it's nice to be able to have options. So I encourage you to try with this hair here, to just encourage you to make some real bold lines. Now notice how I was almost starting to lose the jawline here. So I'm going to just darken that up because, again, it's when you first start drawing, I'm sure many of you have noticed this, your lines feel so dark and you're like, oh no, I'm going to see this line forever. And then as you go along, you start to realize like, oh, I don't even see that line anymore. It kind of just gets almost buried sometimes. Okay, so I got that part in there. Notice how I can still see a lot of the white through here. I want to add some more colors. I might try, since I did get out a green, I just want to see what it looks like. Now, I don't want to add too much green just because you think about green skin, that definitely feels like they're dead, right? But it could also feel almost like she's a zombie or something, and I don't really want to go for that. So I just want to do a little subtle green. Now, again, you do whatever you want on yours. But sometimes just adding, again, a little bit more color that you might not even notice, but it's just there. It just makes the picture more interesting. I might even put, again, a little bit in her hair. I might even put a little bit in the roses, just for a bit of contrast. See how it almost looks like there's a green light that's shining on her. Or maybe she's in some place where there's multiple lights, right? It's just interesting. This green, by the way, is kind of dry. So sometimes if we have something like that, I might even put a little shadow underneath her nose. That can be really, really helpful. Obviously, if you want real bold lines, it's not so helpful. But if you want subtle lines, then having markers that are kind of dry can actually be extremely helpful. They can give you that effect. They might even do, here's another cool thing with the hair. The lines don't even have to be connected. They can be like, whoop, there you go. But it adds to it. Okay, so I just want to add a little bit more detail. I do think I am going to go for a black, but I'm not going to make it quite as heavy. Here, I'm just going to put the black in some places, just because I do want to darken it up more. And I could do that with my other colors, but just for the sake of time, I am going to go to the black marker. I'm going to fill in part of the pupils, but not the whole thing. Again, because I just want to make this more colorful. Trace over part of this time. Again, just to do something different. I think it looks cool to see some of that purple come through. All right. And I am going to put some of the black over her hair. But see how cool it does look to have some of the color show through? I'm not going to put it everywhere. The key thing is to cover those basic shapes, right? Make sure you haven't lost them. Unless you want them to fade into the shadows. That can be a really cool effect, actually. Maybe go a little bit over her chin there. I think what I'm going to do in this case too, to fill in some of the space. Now you don't have to just do all of that with the lines. You could come and maybe take a colored pencil, or you could use a crayon if you don't have a colored pencil. I actually used crayon on this one, believe it or not. I didn't have a colored pencil that day, so I just used Crayola markers and crayons. It's totally fine to use the supplies you have, because the supplies are definitely going to make a difference, right, in your abilities. But having kid supplies, it's kind of like, I'll say it like this: having the most professional supplies in the world are still not going to make a non-artist, this magnificent